Carl Gustav Jung was not a normal child. While other children played, he stared into silence. At the age of 4, Jung experienced visions. Not dreams, but waking images. He saw a dark underground chamber. At its center stood a massive stone throne. On it sat a towering figure, fleshless, crowned, and terrifying. The image burned into his mind. He did not scream. He did not cry. He learned something more dangerous: to stay silent. Because even as a child, Jung understood, some truths cannot be spoken. They must be carried. Jung's father was a pastor. God filled the house. But God did not feel loving to Jung. God felt vast, uncontrollable, terrifying. Religion did not soothe him. It overwhelmed him. Jung felt that God was not good or evil. God was power. And power, he sensed, did not care about human morality. This planted a seed that would later fracture everything Jung believed. As Jung grew older, something strange became undeniable. There were two people inside him. One was modern, scientific, logical. The other felt ancient, older than language, older than history. This second presence felt as though it had lived many lives before. Jung did not fight the split. He observed it. Most people suppress one half of themselves. Jung allowed both to exist, and this tension quietly rewired his mind. By adulthood, Jung was successful, respected, published, admired. Sigmund Freud himself called Jung his successor. But something inside Jung went silent. The dreams stopped speaking clearly. The symbols withdrew. This was not peace. This was suppression. Jung was becoming what the world wanted him to be, and losing what he actually was. Then the dreams returned. Violent, relentless. Jung saw Europe drowning in blood. Waves of red flooding cities. Bodies floating like debris. He woke shaking. He asked himself the unthinkable. Am I losing my mind? Years later, World War I erupted. The dreams were not madness. They were collective visions. The unconscious had seen what consciousness refused to acknowledge. Jung's break with Freud was final. He stood alone. Colleagues distanced themselves. The academic world watched carefully. Jung knew the danger. If he followed the visions too far, he could be labeled insane. If he ignored them, they would devour him from within. There was no safe option. Jung made a decision few ever dared to make. He would not suppress the unconscious. He would enter it consciously. Every night he sat alone, closed his eyes, and allowed the images to rise. He did not lose himself. He listened. He wrote. He drew. Thus began the Red Book, not a diary, not a theory, but a record of a man walking the edge of madness, without falling in. Sigmund Freud was more than a mentor to Jung. He was a father figure. Freud believed psychology must remain scientific, rational and grounded in sexuality. Jung saw something deeper. Symbols, myths, gods reborn in the modern mind. Freud warned him, if you follow this path, you will lose credibility. What Freud really feared was not Jung's madness, but the collapse of authority. This was not just an intellectual disagreement. It was a symbolic patricide. To grow, Jung would have to kill the father. After the break, silence followed. Invitations stopped arriving. Colleagues grew distant. Jung's name became dangerous to mention. He had crossed an invisible line. The academic world values stability. Jung had chosen uncertainty. Isolation is not loneliness. Isolation is when the world no longer mirrors you back. And Jung now stood alone with his inner world, fully exposed. Without the approval of others, Jung's identity began to unravel. Who was he without titles? Without followers? Without validation? The ego depends on mirrors. When mirrors disappear, the ego fractures. Jung felt himself splitting again. But this time the split was violent. Thoughts arrived uninvited. Images demanded attention. The unconscious was no longer knocking. It was breaking down the door. At night, Jung saw figures. Not vague shapes, but distinct presences. Some mocked him. Some accused him. Some demanded obedience. He feared schizophrenia. But he noticed something critical. The figures spoke with intelligence. They argued. They challenged him. This was not chaos. This was structure. The psyche had its own ecosystem, and Jung was trespassing inside it. Jung imposed one rule upon himself. I will not lose consciousness. He did not surrender. He dialogued. He spoke to the figures, asked them questions, recorded their responses. This discipline saved him. The madman is consumed by the unconscious. The initiate negotiates with it. This single rule separated Jung from insanity. Jung knew the danger. One wrong step, and he would never return. He saw patients who had drowned in their inner worlds. People who descended without a rope. He was walking a narrow bridge between worlds. Every night he asked, "Am I still myself?" Every morning he checked, "Can I still function?" This balance was exhausting, but necessary. One night Jung stopped resisting entirely. He allowed the images to pull him downward. He entered landscapes, deserts, caves, ancient cities. This was no longer imagination. It was initiation. He was no longer observing the unconscious. He was inside it. And something ancient noticed him. After this night, Jung knew something irreversible had happened. He could not return to who he was before. The unconscious had accepted him. But acceptance came with a price. He would have to let parts of himself die. The hero, the authority, the certainty. What awaited him next was not knowledge, but confrontation. The shadow was waiting. Jung needed a method. If he was going to enter the unconscious, he had to do it without drowning. So he created something radical. He called it active imagination. It was not dreaming, not fantasy, not hallucination. It was conscious descent. Jung allowed images to arise, then stepped into them while awake. He spoke to them, questioned them, argued with them. This was not escape. This was confrontation. At first, Jung expected chaos. Instead, he found order. The unconscious had rules, territories, patterns. Figures appeared consistently. Landscapes repeated. This was not randomness. It was a world. And Jung was an intruder. The unconscious did not exist for his comfort. It existed long before him. Not all figures welcomed Jung. Some laughed at him. Some called him arrogant. Others demanded submission. They accused him of believing he was special. They reminded him, "You are not the master here." Jung realized, the unconscious resents ego domination. Enter with humility or be destroyed. Among the hostile voices, one spoke differently. It was calm, measured. It did not command. It instructed. This voice challenged Jung's assumptions. It told him, "You do not create meaning. You discover it." Jung began to understand. The psyche is not personal. It is transpersonal. Symbols began to appear. Snakes, circles, blood, stone. Jung recognized them from ancient myths. Cultures separated by oceans, yet sharing the same imagery. This shattered a core assumption of modern psychology. The mind does not invent symbols. It inherits them. Jung stopped thinking of the psyche as a machine. It behaved like a living being. It reacted, corrected, punished arrogance. It rewarded patience. The unconscious was not something to use. It was something to relate to. This realization changed psychology forever. Jung recorded everything. Not casually. Ritually. He wrote in calligraphy, painted images with care. This was not art. This was containment. By giving the visions form, he prevented them from consuming him. Thus the Red Book became a vessel. Jung noticed a pattern. Whenever he inflated himself, the visions turned violent. Whenever he listened, they softened. The unconscious did not tolerate arrogance. This was not therapy. This was law. Break it and madness followed. As Jung went deeper, the atmosphere changed. The figures grew darker. He sensed something vast ahead. Something personal. Something he had avoided his entire life. The shadow. And it was waiting. Jung felt it before he saw it. The atmosphere thickened. The inner world grew heavy. This was not fear of the unknown. This was recognition. The shadow is not foreign. It is intimate. It is everything you refuse to be. Jung understood. To continue forward, he would have to stop judging. The shadow did not arrive as a monster. It arrived as a mirror. It spoke with Jung's voice. It knew his thoughts, his fears, his secret contempt. The shadow accused him of moral superiority, of hiding aggression behind intellect, of pretending to be above human darkness. The most disturbing realization came next. The shadow was right. Jung learned something terrifying. The more a person identifies as good, the more dangerous their shadow becomes. Repressed aggression does not disappear. It waits, then it acts unconsciously. This is how cruelty hides behind virtue. The shadow does not make you evil. It reveals what you refuse to admit. Jung recognized shadow possession everywhere. In mobs, in fanatics, in nations. When people deny their darkness, they project it onto others. Enemies become monsters. Violence becomes justified. The shadow does not disappear. It seeks expression, and if ignored, it takes control. The shadow demanded Jung's honesty, not analysis, not theory, confession. He had to admit his envy, his hunger for power, his desire to dominate. This was not humiliation. It was liberation. The shadow weakens when acknowledged. Jung refused to destroy the shadow. He integrated it. The goal was not purity. The goal was wholeness. A man without a shadow is not holy. He is dangerous. True morality comes from awareness, not denial. Integration came with a price. Jung lost illusions. Certainty died. The world no longer felt simple. But something else emerged. Depth. Compassion. Strength without arrogance. The shadow was no longer an enemy. It was a teacher. Beyond the shadow lay something even more destabilizing. The death of the hero. The collapse of meaning. The fall of God within the psyche. Jung sensed it approaching. What awaited him was not darkness, but emptiness. Up to this point, Jung still believed quietly that insight would save him. That understanding would bring resolution. That knowledge would restore order. But the inner world had other plans. The hero archetype, the part of Jung that wanted mastery, began to weaken. Every time he tried to control the descent, the visions collapsed. The psyche was not asking for intelligence. It was demanding sacrifice. In Jung's visions, heroes began to die. Warriors were defeated. Kings were humiliated. Saviors were crucified. These were not religious fantasies. They were psychological events. The psyche was dismantling Jung's belief that he could save himself. That illusion had to die, because the hero seeks victory. The soul seeks truth. Then something even more unsettling occurred. God disappeared. Not metaphorically, experientially. The inner voice of absolute authority, the source of certainty, went silent. Jung felt abandoned. This was not atheism. This was psychological God death. When the inner God dies, meaning collapses, and without meaning, the ego panics. Without the hero, without God, Jung entered the abyss. Nothing mattered. Values dissolved. Goals lost gravity. This was not depression. It was disorientation. The psyche had stripped him of borrowed meaning. Now he stood naked before existence itself. Many never return from this stage. They distract. They numb. They rebuild false gods. Jung stayed. Jung realized something crucial. The hero archetype inflates the ego. It creates superiority, mission,
destiny.
But the unconscious does not tolerate inflation. Every culture encodes this truth. Heroes must die, not physically, symbolically. Only then can humility replace arrogance. Out of the emptiness, something subtle emerged. Not belief. Experience. Meaning no longer came from ideas. It came from relationship. Relationship to the psyche, to symbols, to life itself. Jung no longer sought answers. He listened. This was the beginning of wisdom. The ego resisted. It wanted importance, recognition, purpose. The psyche refused. Humiliation followed. Not cruelty, but correction. Jung understood. The ego is not king. It is servant, and servants must learn obedience. In the silence that followed collapse, a new presence approached. Not hostile, not personal, ancient. It did not offer salvation. It offered understanding. The wise old man, Philemon, and with him, a new map of the human soul. After the collapse of the hero, silence followed. Then, a presence, not emotional, not dramatic, calm, observant, ancient. Philemon appeared as an old man with wings. He did not demand obedience. He did not offer comfort. He spoke as though Jung were a student, not a patient. For the first time, Jung was not confronting. He was listening. Philemon told Jung something radical. Your thoughts are not produced by you. They arrive, they move through you, they leave, The ego does not create ideas. It receives them. This shattered modern assumptions about identity. If thoughts are not owned, then neither are beliefs. The mind is not a fortress. It is a crossroads. Philemon revealed something even deeper. Beneath personal memories lies a shared psychic layer, not inherited memories, but inherited patterns. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the wise old man. Archetypes are not images. They are forces shaping perception. This was the birth of Jung's most famous idea, the collective unconscious. Jung realized why myths repeat across cultures. Humans don't create stories. Stories create humans. When an archetype is ignored, it doesn't disappear. It manifests as obsession, addiction, ideology. Modern man believes he has outgrown myth, but myth has not outgrown him. Philemon showed Jung another principle. Some events are not connected by cause, but by meaning. A dream mirrors reality. A symbol appears at the exact moment it's needed. This is synchronicity, not coincidence, but pattern, meaning woven into time itself. Jung realized religion was not about belief. It was about psychic orientation. God images are symbols of inner forces. When religion collapses, those forces do not vanish. They possess. This is why secular societies suffer anxiety, fanaticism, and despair. The gods return, not as gods, but as symptoms. Philemon warned Jung. Knowledge does not liberate. Responsibility does. To recognize an archetype is to become accountable to it. Those who deny the unconscious are ruled by it. Those who face it carry a burden few accept. Jung understood. This path is not for everyone. Philemon did not stay forever. Teachers withdraw. Integration must follow revelation. Jung sensed the descent nearing completion. What remained was not more visions, but application. The task ahead was life itself. Individuation. The descent did not end with revelation. It ended with responsibility. Jung began to rise, not upward, but outward, back into ordinary life. The visions did not disappear. They quieted. The task was no longer exploration. It was integration. To live what had been seen. Jung called the final process individuation, not self-improvement, not happiness, not perfection, wholeness. To individuate is to become what you already are, without illusion. It means accepting contradiction, carrying tension, refusing false unity. Most people confuse individuation with ego fulfillment. It is the opposite. The ego learns its limits. Jung understood something few dared to say. Every psyche contains its opposite. The masculine carries the feminine. The feminine carries the masculine. He called them anima, the inner feminine, animus, the inner masculine. When ignored, they sabotage relationships. When integrated, they deepen them. Projection is not love. It is blindness. Love begins when projection ends. Individuation is rare because it requires solitude. It requires conflict. It requires abandoning group identity. Most people choose belonging over truth, certainty over depth, safety over meaning. The crowd offers protection, but it steals the soul. Jung did not condemn this. He understood it. But he warned of the cost. Jung saw modern illness clearly. It was not physical. It was spiritual disconnection. When meaning collapses, anxiety rises, addiction follows. Ideology replaces religion. People search for salvation in politics, money, identity. But these are substitutes. The soul knows the difference, and it suffers when ignored. Jung did not become a mystic hermit. He returned. He taught. He treated patients. He lived an ordinary life. But he carried extraordinary depth. The Red Book remained private. Not because it lacked value, but because it demanded maturity. It was not meant to be consumed. It was meant to be lived. Near the end of his life, Jung issued a warning. Not a threat, a diagnosis. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What you deny controls you. What you face transforms you. The unconscious does not punish. It compensates. Some will leave here unchanged. Others won't. If you felt this, you are already know to do. Subscribe to this channel. The descent continues.